Beyond the headlines. This is World Insight.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Starting on August the 2nd, the European Commission's AI Office extended the scope of the Artificial Intelligence Act and new transparency rules came into force. Interactive AI systems such as chatbots must now clearly inform users they are not human. AI-generated or manipulated content also must carry machine-readable markings. These obligations mark a significant step in the phased rollout of the EU's AI Act, but its implications stretch far beyond Europe. How will these rules and related rules, meanwhile, reshape the trajectory of AI development? What does it mean for the future of global AI governance? This is a topic beyond Europe. Let's bring in our panelists. In Berlin, Germany, we're joined by Fabian Westerhede, CEO of Rise of AI. In Shenzhen, China, Liu Shaoshan, Director of the Embodied AI at the Shenzhen Institute of Artificial Intelligence and Robotics for Society. In Beijing, Alex Lam, Assistant Professor with Tsinghua University College of AI. Last but not least, in Stockholm, Virginia Dignam, Professor of Umeå University, Director of the AI Policy Lab there. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us now. The world already know the EU AI Act into implementation, but exactly what do you think are the key rules within the Act that might have impact on the rest of the world? Go to you, Virginia.
Consumers in Europe and elsewhere already have rights. And these rights come because AI is a product or a service like anything else. And so existing consumer law and product liability, non-discrimination, data protection, and so on always apply. There is no exception for AI. What the AI Act tries to do is to make it all more organized and more focused on the specifics of what AI systems can or cannot do for consumers. But I think that the main principles are that the AI Act is developed and put in place as a consumer protection effort, and at the same time that it is not about the machine itself. It is not something which changes drastically from before. It's just making clear that your rights, your protections, the rules that guide those rights and protections remain in place with or without AI.
All right. Fabian, of course, it is done in the names of consumer, but exactly what is the real content of this act that would have an impact both on the companies, on the consumers, and also on those who do businesses with the EU?
So I think the main change with the law now is that we have AI generated content labels. So if you talk to a chatbot, you need to know. If you talk to a sales agents and they use AI, they have to tell you. So this is what Virginia said about consumer rights. We as the consumer of AI should know it's AI. So if someone is generating a deep fake, it has to be known. So we see this joke already now in newspapers, in advertising, where under objects it's written AI generated label. Yes, for a fridge or a toaster or a car, we know no one is generating, taking pictures anymore. Everything's AI generated. Now you just have to put a small label in there. But this only accounts for businesses with a business purpose. So if you're a private person, you don't have to do it. If you're a private person posting on Instagram or WeChat, you don't have to do it. It's only for businesses with a business mean or for political parties in an official communication. So honestly, this is a very fair thing, which is overdue because most people don't have the literacy to see the differences.
That is why we have so much debate, including today, about it. For example, it will have an impact on documenting models, performing risk assessment when required, maintaining technical documentation, implementing governance and monitoring process, providing greater transparency about AI systems, preparing for audits and regulatory oversight. And all of these are in that package. So we have never seen anything like that before, shall we say, elsewhere in the world. So if implemented, even a watered-down version, Fabian, what's going to be the interesting relationship among all the stakeholders?
I would say more bureaucracy at the end, so more paperwork, but also more awareness. If you know you have a law, you have to comply with it, so you have to think before you act. And I would say a lot of companies have done something without thinking or without, having the transparency in the reasoning, and it's mainly targeting to American models and maybe Chinese models who have to comply now with European laws. Because honestly, Germany doesn't have so many, or Europe doesn't have so many successful large language models. So it's mainly foreign entities who are now have to comply with European law. It's for them. Then at the same time, we speak about high risk things. So if you're doing it for law enforcement, if you do it for mass surveillance, there's certain, or healthcare and recruiting, there are certain laws you have to comply to, which is at the end to make sure that the AI systems out there are safe and reliable.
Both Shaoshan and Alex have been working on this front for long. So tell us about your both gut feelings at this moment about this law, and including the later implementation of the codes of practice, and also what does that mean for the stakeholders as you can see today. Let's go to Alex first.
I mean, I think it's really great to see regulators exploring this topic because, of course, when you read text online, like on social media, or you're using a customer service system, nowadays, sometimes when you look at the text, you can kind of get an intuition for whether it was AI generated or not. But over time, it's going to get harder to tell. And then, of course, if the AI system were intentionally designed to seem as human-like as possible, I'm quite sure it's within the capabilities of today's models to seem very human-like. And to me, it seems like a good idea to put some kind of a labeling requirement on that. But I guess, with any kind of requirement, there might be questions of like how much overhead there is and like how it fits into like the UI for particular systems. So I wonder if the law is going to have to get refined some over time, maybe to make sure it's kind of as lightweight as possible. But I think it's exciting to see exploration on this topic.
First, I would like to acknowledge that this law is good, this regulation, to have transparency. That's necessary. But I worry that as it develops, it becomes more complicated. For example, if a business generates a picture with a right tag saying that it's AI generated, then some person take out the AI tag and post it on LinkedIn or Twitter, whatever. Would they introduce trouble to the company? We don't know, because as we use the technology more, it would become more and more complex.
Can you explain what do you mean by they take the label and put it onto the social media? I don't understand your example. Can you explain a little bit more? Sorry, please.
Because if a content is AI generated, then a business has to label it and say, I'm a user of some AI generation tool to generate a picture of me or whatever. Then the company is obliged to annotate that picture as AI generated. But if I'm the user, I take the picture, I cut out the part that says AI generated, then I post it on some website and saying, that's a realistic picture. Would that eventually introduce any trouble for the company who correctly put the label on? More complex examples will come because there will be a million usage examples there. So that's the example I try to indicate. I'm from a entrepreneurial background, so I'm a bit against over-regulation for several reasons. First, AI is still a baby today. We don't know what AI would not do. And there are many startups in this space. I like the example Fabian brought up in saying that, it's all the big companies doing LLM in Europe, so we try to put up some more regulation. But from my personal experience, the more regulation you put up, you are stopping startups from advancing technology. You're giving an unfair advantage to the established companies, such as Google, who has a department or legal department that's staffed with 1,000 very good lawyers. So if I am a European startup today trying to do a European version LLM, over-regulation would definitely stop me. I would just sell the company to Google, so that that would strangle any innovation over there. The second reason I'm against over-regulation today is overhead. We have discussed about overhead and what it would mean for stakeholders. That just means that another 1,000 lawyers would keep their jobs to deal with this kind of regulation. That would be one overhead. But eventually, who would pay for the overhead is the consumer. The price would go up because they have to sustain that department. So I think we should have some freedom for the company to explore before we put in too much regulation. And that's my personal standpoint.
The general purpose AI code of practice and additional implementation guidelines. Of course, this has been postponed until implementation later in the year, but this has a lot to do with the large language models that we're talking about.
The advances in technology are not necessarily the same as the advances and the need for regulation. We build cars that can easily drive 300 kilometers per hour. We have laws that say if that car goes in our street, doesn't drive more than 30 kilometers. That doesn't say nothing about the capabilities of the technology, and we need to start separating the two things. We can still innovate, we can still develop AI systems without outside of what the use of those systems are. In specific situations, law enforcement, healthcare, education, you name it, we need to put some kind of guardrail. For instance, guardrails in terms of explainability. The system needs to, in terms of just naming it, like Fabian already said, the system, if it's a chatbot, will need to say it is a chatbot, or we need to say this is an AI-generated image. It doesn't mean that the companies that are developing these systems cannot continue developing AI-generated images and so on. It means that when we are using it in a specific context, we need to name it. We need to have the explanation. So I would like to go back to the point of Shoshan on overregulation. I think that we are always talking about two extremes, no regulation at all or overregulation. Where we want to be is somewhere in the middle. And more than that, regulation is by definition not only about prohibitions. Regulation is about ensuring that we create a safe and level playing field, both for the developers, but mostly for those that use and that deploy these technologies. Comparing the lack of regulation with over-regulation is kind of distorting the discussion to the other extreme. Of course, no one wants over-regulation. No one wants bad regulation, and we need to agree that sometimes regulation is bad. But all of us, and like Fabian already also mentioned, in any other field of activity, in any other industrial sector, it would be unthinkable not to have some type of regulation.
我爱你 I love you 我爱你 This might be the easiest way to say I love you, since there are so many other romantic expressions. No matter if you're a rookie
你好，我的中文一点点
or a sophisticated learner,
我来北京5年了，我是本地人。
there is definitely something that will interest you. Check out Takeaway Chinese, a word that starts with 你好.
Whether it is a wrong impression that Europe has been building a legislative wall against AI.
There's kind of truth in it, but not everything. Europe doesn't have a problem with AI. It has a problem that foreign entities, big techs, are exploiting tax paying, avoiding taxes, exploiting human rights, civil rights, and doing a lot of things which are not compliant with European law. So they do this with almost every field of industries, trying to figure out how to defend your domestic market. And by the way, China is a role model with this. China is a role model how they defend their consumers against especially American technologies. You have a very strong market, very domestic market, very good companies, because you help them to grow and defend them against the outside. So this is something Europe tries to figure out too, but we don't have the same strength in figuring out new models. So I agree with you. We are not leading in LMMs at the moment. We're not leading at agentic. That's true. Therefore, I also say the impact, you ask for the impact on the world, it's not so big. If you talk about other countries like in Africa or Latin America, they use mainly cheaper versions coming from China because their token usage is lower and more efficient. And if you can afford it, you take maybe the American models, but they're highly expensive. Americans doing premium, the Chinese doing very good quality for the best price. So honestly, what China is doing with the models has more impact than Europe. So we should not overestimate Europe. It's more European protection. And also as a European, I don't like it a lot. I would say we need to open the market a little bit more, foster more startups, don't have too much regulation because, as it was mentioned, it is, damping Europeans and startups. But this is a debate we have almost for every field.
I think Fabian gave a fabulous answer. It's to protect the consumers. But that at the same time, it suppresses the startup culture. The more you do it, in the case of overregulation per se, the less chances that there will be new European startups to take over or at least get advanced in new technology fields, whether it's LLM or agentic. On the opposite side, whether it's the United States or China, they try to encourage innovation at the beginning by imposing less regulation until the companies become mature, become strong enough to deal with regulation. That's part of the reason, again, it's probably my personal observation, it's part of the reason why we see more startups coming from China and the United States today, especially in the AI world. Fabrice gave me a lot of reflection why that happened, because in the European perspective, a lot of companies trying to come to Europe, explore and get the money and get out. And that's been the story for a while. But then I think a small suggestion from the European Parliament is to think of a way to protect the consumers while encouraging their startup culture. If it continues like this, it's very hard for European companies to generate global revenue in the years to come.
China also put out a lot of regulations regarding AI already over the past 2 to 3 years. If we can put China, EU, and the US together for today's debate at least, what does that mean, the different approaches?
Well, I think whether it's China and the United States, it's rarely seen that they put out preemptive regulation, meaning that the technology, if it's not tested, we don't understand its outcome, we're not going to regulate it. But again, maybe it's my personal observation. It's often the case that the European Parliament will put up a preemptive regulation before the technology hit the market and get enough data. They try to establish a framework. And that's not very healthy, again, for innovation. So I think that's the key difference. Of course, there are regulations in China, but usually they pilot the case in certain cities and see the outcome, and then gradually they build up the regulation system. So as in the United States, different states can have different laws, even different cities can have different regulation, so that there are enough room for piloting. But then once a law is enforced top-down in Europe, there's no room for piloting at all, because everybody has to follow, even though there are many countries under Europe.
What would that mean to those who try to come into the European market? To those who are working now and also willing to work with European scientists and innovators, as well as entrepreneurs, those from outside European continent. What would that mean to them? And as a result of that, the impact will be bigger than only within Europe, isn't it?
It's a huge domestic market. So if you, as a Chinese or American company, figure out European laws, you maybe use the laws or the framework yourself because it's a good standard and it's something good to sell. If you use my LMM, it's compliant in Europe, that's compliant in China too, etc. That's always a good point to sell. I think on the researcher level, entrepreneur level, it will not change a lot because we've seen this with GDPR, data privacy. Yes, data privacy is annoying, but it's in the core, it's the right law. In the core, it's about protecting our data. But then, European lawmakers always don't see the difference between data privacy and privacy. This is a difference, looking at the private things and looking at data overall. So entrepreneurs have to figure out how to be smarter. If there's more law, you need to be smarter, either complying with the law or finding better approaches to go for this. And Elements is just one market. The huge market will be serving it in the B2B space, running hospitals, running law enforcement, running cars, and all this. Then LMN is just a commodity. It's just one supplier in the value chain. And the big untapped market is bringing solutions to all the companies out there. Right. And this is still open. This is a field for Americans, Chinese, and European companies to do.
Shaoshan, on that, I would love to hear your thoughts as well on the businesses.
Well, it's the debate is so interesting. So along with Fabian's logic, if Europeans are making all these laws and regulations, making the market entry harder and harder, why not just stop all the foreign companies coming in and invest that same amount of money into domestic companies doing application, as you said? LLM may be too late, but application, right? You can just block all the foreign companies and allow European itself to develop their own companies. Maybe that would be more helpful to the startup ecosystem compared to imposing more and more regulation, because after all, it's the consumers that who pay for it.
Please, Fabian.
Yes, this would be an approach, and this is, by the way, a Chinese approach. China was very successful keeping out Americans. We know Google, etc. They said, like, hey, Google, if you want to be in China, you have to comply with our laws. And Google said, we don't. So they are out, and that's why a Chinese company is number one in China. But Europeans are way too moral for this. They think we are the last one who's open for free market, no taxation. We want to have free business for everyone. The thing is, Trump is not doing it. Chinese doing it on their own way for their success. And Europe is like choosing the worst of both of them. So I'm appealing a lot for we have to be a little bit more Chinese and we have to be a little bit more American and have to be less European because the European way is the worst of it. So that is the struggle where I see, and I think we would agree. We need to protect European companies, but they will not do it because they think they are above the moral standards in Brussels. It's a Brussels thing. It's a European Parliament problem.
But the Brussels also thinking about the Brussels effect, so to speak.
Yes, but that's morally putting yourself above everyone else. You think your law is the best, and with the Brussels effect, you're making the world better? Honestly, you don't. Because the impact of other nations sometimes is way larger. We have this in Germany. We want to be the number one in sustainability, but we have 1% of CO carbon emission. If you go for sustainability, China has the largest impact. America has a large impact because industry is bigger. You have way more impact, and China is doing a lot on the green part, on sustainability, I would say. So China is way more impact than Germany, but our laws are the strictest. So sometimes we just want to be like, in the classroom, the number one student, but who doesn't have the most impact at the end. He just has the best grade.
Alex, your thoughts on this?
If a country wants to establish a presence in AI, if they wanted to train like a totally competitive frontier model, it could just require a large fraction of their resources in terms of like data centers, software engineers. So one, they could try to work together to do it. But, another thing that a country could do is one way they could at least start to have a little bit of this like kind of AI sovereignty is they could develop like a domestic inference stack. So if there's like an open model, like a DeepSeek or Kimi K3, they could at least say there is the capability to run the model completely within the country, and we'll have complete control over this process, and we'll have a little bit of sovereignty, even if we're not taking complete ownership of the full pre-training process.
And do you see that can be pragmatic?
It could be a first step towards maybe getting some more involvement in post-training or pre-training, depending on how things go. But if I think about countries like Brazil, Iran, India, they may not have the concentration of capital or the developer talent to make a fully competitive frontier model yet. But I think they may have the resources and the willpower to build this fully domestic inference stack.
Right. How fragmented is global governance on artificial intelligence? Is there a thread, do you think, that can magically bring everybody together? Shaoshan, I go with you first.
So I think what would happen is that, for example, in China, people have used AI a lot. Then gradually, the government will come up with proper regulation for AI that proves to be the most beneficial to society. Then the rest of the world would adopt. Same as in the United States, because they use frontier AI a lot. They develop and they use, and then they regulate. At this point, I'm afraid that we don't have enough data point to show that what are the key benefits of AI, what are the key shortcomings of AI, how we should regulate. So I think it will still take a few years. But the two leading countries today are very obvious, is China and United States. Hopefully the two countries can work together, at least on regulation, if not on other frontiers. Then maybe give it 1 year or two, then we will have a better answer than today.
Alex, your thoughts?
I think what's going to happen is we're going to have more of like a global shared governance system for, I guess, AI technologies, and maybe the UN has a role to play in it. And then you also have the new World AI Cooperation Organization. So I think hopefully we'll create a system where all the countries of the world are kind of stakeholders in responsible AI.
Fabian, last but not least, since we started the topic of discussion about the EU latest AI Act, it is only fair we let you to wrap it up.
So what we see today is a softer version from the ideal they had 8 years ago. And it is also less impactful than they thought. It will be less strict, and it will take another half a year until it's in implementation in the real case. And then we have to see into the details, because every nation will do their own thing. And we will have to discuss, at least in half a year again, how the main countries like Paris and Berlin will act on this.
Very interesting. Fabian, Shaoshan, Alex, thank you so much for your input and insights, and also our appreciation going to Virginia earlier joining the program as well. Thank you so much. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. Thanks for being with me. Bye for now.
You've been listening to programs from CGTN Radio.
CGTN Radio.
We invite you to visit us online for more audio, pictures, and in-depth reports. At radio.cgtn.com, you can access a wide range of programs and find your favorite news, talk, features, entertainment shows, and podcasts. Hear the difference with CGTN Radio.